All right, guys, hi. My name is Matt Swinney, and I want to say thank you for joining me for Cuts and Coffee, right? That's not a bad way to start your day. Anyway, I want to thank Hairbrain and Lanza Healing Hair Care for having me here today. Pretty excited. I'm coming to you live from my salon in Minneapolis. It's called Evolution. Hey, Gloria. I'm going to do the best I can to answer your questions. As we're cutting, it can be a little bit difficult, but I can go back through afterwards and help answer some questions, and hopefully we get you guys moving in the right direction on this six-figure haircut. The reason I call it the six-figure haircut, is because it's a beautiful long layered haircut, and I believe that about 80% of the people, 70% of the people that come through most salons are either have long hair or want long hair. And so if you're able to create a really beautiful long layer that grows out very well, you're gonna notice a huge influx in your books behind the chair. So I, without further ado, think we should get started. If you'll notice right now, my model, or mannequin, however you want to describe it, her hair is dry, right? So this whole haircut is going to be cut dry. One of the things with long hair, I think it's important, you want to get a really nice foundation put in, and I think that when you're doing it on dry hair, it's a little bit more controlled. So we're going to show you this beautiful long layered kind of Victoria's Secret style haircut. All right, so basically when we start out here, guys, we're going to take a nice center section down the back. Let's see if I can get her lined up quick. And we're going to start taking that haircut, that first section. We're going to start from the occipital bone to the nape, right? So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to take my sections. And again, I think it's really important, when you're cutting dry hair, you need to make sure that you come in and you kind of give the hair the proper set, if you will, like the proper tools. And so what I like to use is I put a little bit of this Lanza healing oil in there. And the healing oil is really nice when you are cutting dry hair, to give the hair just a little bit of smoothness and a little bit of control. So when we're cutting, perimeters, a lot of people tend to use their fingers. And when you use your fingers, what you end up doing is you end up creating elevation and tension. And those are two things that are going to create graduation. So when I go through and I cut this perimeter of my long layered haircuts, I like to just use the wide tooth portion of the comb. Do you guys see that? So I just use the wide tooth portion of the comb. And then when I also do that, I want you to notice something. The spine of the comb is pointing straight out. So the spine is not tilted up. If we tilt that spine of the comb up, what we start to do is we start to create graduation. And so our goal is to create a nice blunt foundation on our long layered haircut. And the reason that we would want to create a little bit of that kind of like blunt line on that foundation is because we know that long layered clients, they go longer in between their haircuts, and they should. I probably cut most of my long layers maybe 3 times a year, right? At max 3 times a year. And so we want to have a nice sturdy foundation down there. And I know you say, oh, if you're only cutting their hair 3 times a year, then how's that going to affect my pocketbook, my money, right? But the thought process is that if I'm only cutting her hair 2 times a year or 3 times a year, and her current stylist is cutting her hair, let's say, 5 times a year, or her friend's current stylist is cutting her hair 5 times a year, they're gonna start talking, because we all know, no matter where you are in the world, because I see people from India, I see people from Sri Lanka, I see people from New Zealand on here, we all know, no matter where you are in the world, one of the great things about ladies is that they like to talk and they like to share their experiences that they have, at your salon. And so I think it's really important when we think about this is that we're thinking about, people talking about your haircuts is the best advertisement you can get. Okay? So here we go. Next section. I'm going to comb this straight down. Remember, the spine of the comb is pointing straight out towards me. It's not tilted up. And then I'm going to cut directly underneath my comb. And you can see that we're starting to build that really nice solid foundation. So again, I'm going to turn this way, comb the hair straight down, and then I'm going to cut directly underneath my comb. Now, if you start cutting like maybe a half an inch or an inch away from your comb, what you're going to realize is that you're going to start to, again, create graduations, and you're going to start to create jumps, right? Jumps in your perimeter, right? And we want our perimeter to be nice and strong. So again, we're coming through, one comb, nice and smooth. I'm going to make sure that the spine of that comb is facing me. And then I'm going to start to cut that hair. And you can see how beautiful that perimeter line is getting. Because we can always go through and texturize it, but if we create too much texture in this initial perimeter cutting, then what ends up happening is it starts to get real wispy, and then you get those clients that come in, and I know we've all had this, a new client that comes in and says, you know, my hair has never really grown past here or something like that. And a lot of times that's because of how it's treated, not because of the actual hair itself. Next section, so you can see now we're trying to do the back. Now this mannequin is a nice mannequin. So she's got about medium density hair. We're trying to do the perimeter in as minimal sectioning as possible, right? Because the more sections, the more possibility for error, right? So next section, cut directly underneath my comb. Remember, the spine of that comb is going to be facing straight out towards you. And you'll notice too, I'm actually moving the mannequin stand, but you know, if it was a model or a client, I'd be standing up, and what would be happening is I'd be moving around her so that I'm working directly in front of me. So the section I'm cutting is directly in front of me. At the section that I'm cutting, if I'm pulling the hair to meet me and I'm over directing, then that starts to become a problem, right? Because then you're going to start to create little lengths that you don't want to see. So again, we're going to come in here, working that perimeter, cutting with our wide tooth portion of our comb, and just remove that hair. Next section, I'm going to come in here, give the hair a nice comb down. I've got my shear bracing the hair behind. It's a great way to do it. And again, I'm going to cut in here all the way, you know, to that same spot that sits directly underneath my comb. So again, I'm not combing to here and then trying to chip in that line. I'm bringing that comb all the way down to the top of my previous cut section, pulling that spine towards me, and then removing the hair to get a really nice, even perimeter. All right, so next section, we're gonna go on and we're gonna move to the front. And you know, the face frame, in my opinion, is the most important part of any long layered haircut. And what we tend to do with our face frames a lot of times is we tend to take too strong of a diagonal in the face frame. And what I mean by that is the section or the cut section looks like this, right? Can you guys see that? It's very diagonal. So what ends up happening is we wipe out this long length of hair, you know, that sits right above the ear. And so our clients end up with like two haircuts. Has anyone ever heard that, right? Like I feel like I have a bob in the front and a party in the back, right? So that happens a lot with long layers, and I see it a lot coming in my salon for new clients. So we're gonna show you guys how to do long layers without creating that. Get her nice and center. All right, so we're gonna start off just by taking a nice little triangle in the center, okay? Got a nice little triangle. That little triangle is gonna be our guide for both sides, okay? You guys all see that? I'll take it off here real quick. So just a nice little triangle, okay? Come in here. So when we set up our face frame, we want to make sure that, you know, that's the discussion, that part of that consultation that you have, like at what length do you want to see it, that kind of thing. Now I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to take this away right about her mouth, okay? And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to come in with a point cut. And you notice, you see how parallel my shears are to the hair? So the more parallel your shears are to the hair, the softer your point cut is, okay? So the more parallel your shears are to the hair, the softer. The more diagonal I get, the more aggressive that point cut starts to become, right? And the more texture we create. And our goal here is to create softness, not strong texture. There's a big difference. And so I don't think a lot of people necessarily think about the direction or the angle of how the shear enters the hair is actually going to make a difference, right? But it really does. So we're going to take our next section. And then these face framing sections that we're taking, you'll notice, are going to end up being extremely vertical. So you see that? How vertical that section is next to her face? So I'm not taking this and going to her ear and taking the whole side. These sections are going to be done very vertical because, like I said earlier, what we're trying to do is we're trying to salvage that length that sits in front of the ear, okay? So I'm going to take my section, give it a nice soft comb, a light grip with my fingers so I'm not overly tensioning the hair. And then I'm going to take the axis of my shear. The axis of my shear is where the two blades meet, okay? That's because that tends to be the sharpest part of the shear. And then it's going to be a slight open and close, just like this. So I'm not slide cutting down the hair. Slide cut is essentially a razor, right? And so I would never razor dry hair. So I think slide cutting on dry hair gets to be really aggressive and starts to create frizz. So it looks like this, the motion, just a really fast open and close of the axis of the shear, which tends to be the sharpest point of the shear. So I'm going to rest my shear in here. Notice my shear is very vertical like my section. Turn her this way. Okay. You guys see this? So the shear comes in very vertically, just like that. And then it's just a slight open and close of the axis of those shears. And you can see then, as we start to do that, we're going to start to salvage length as we get down to the bottom. Next section. Again, a very vertical section. Coming in, and this section right here is going to sit roughly about 1/4 of an inch in front of the ear, okay? So that's important to note. This section is going to sit about 1/4 of an inch in front of the ear. Lightly grab your section, so there's not a lot of tension. I'm not like using this to kind of try and do a pull-up or anything here. I'm just using it to lightly grab it. My hands are just keeping it in order. I rest the shear in there, and then I just start using the axis of my shear. The tip of my blade is basically pointing straight down to the ground. So it's not pointing back, it's pointing straight down. And so now when I turn her to you, you can see we're starting to loosen up that front compared to the other side, but all of that length is staying, right? Which is really important. We're still having all of this length here to play with. And I think that's one of the things with girls with long hair that really ends up being a problem is people wipe out so much of that hair around the face, and then it just gets really frustrating for the client. All right, so this last section is literally going to sit directly in front of the ear. So not on top of the ear, not behind the ear, but in front. So it looks like this. There's where that section sits. That's going to be the last section of my face frame, okay? On this side. All right, so, oops, this kind of went down a little. Let me fix that for you guys. I kicked my stand. Sorry, don't worry. There we go, that's better. Okay, so next section, light grasp, coming in, and then just a slight open and close of that shear, working myself all the way down to the perimeter. You guys can see we've started to create a really nice face frame. And now what we can do, notice we didn't cut the side when we were cutting the bottom perimeter. We didn't go through and do that. So now we come in and connect our side, right? So that's a great way to make sure that we don't cut off that side perimeter. So now our face frame sits in front of her ear. So with her long layers, she's able to still have what looks to be, if you will, like mermaid hair, right, around her face. Okay, so next section, we're gonna switch to the other side. And this is where a lot of people tend to have like a nice aha moment in this haircut. I think it's really important to be able to kind of mimic, you know, on one side what you do on the other. So here's how we cut, which would be our client's left side, right? So if you're standing behind the client, it's the left side. So a lot of people struggle and then they start to cut upward here, right? So we cut down one side, up the other. What we're gonna do is cut down on both sides so that we can have that scissor tip pointing straight down to the ground and maintaining as much length as possible. So it's gonna look like this. We're gonna make an X, right? See how I make an X with my wrist like this? Gonna make an X, flip the shear down, and look at the base of that shear, the point of that shear, automatically drops to face the ground. You guys see that? And then again, we're working on the axis of our shear because that's the sharpest part of our shear, and working ourselves straight down to the ground, right? So it's that easy, guys, to match your sides. And I think that that's something that's really important when you're cutting face frames. I think a lot of people, what we tend to do is cut one side, then cut the other. It's not necessarily right, so we chip away at one side, and then we have to chip away at the other side, and then we just continue chipping, and then the face frame gets a little shorter. And we end up creating a look not necessarily what we wanted to see in the first place. So again, dropping that shear, creating the X, axis of our shear, working ourselves all the way down, and you notice when I sit here, you see where the point of that blade is? See how it's pointing straight down to the ground? That's a great way to. Now, if I flip her around to you, you guys can see she's getting this really beautiful face frame. Oops, there we go. Getting this really beautiful face frame, and we're starting to open it up, but she still has her beautiful, you know, long mermaid hair. You know, it's a lot of times girls come in with long hair and they're like, oh, I want something new, I want something fresh, I want something different, but I don't want to lose any length and I don't want to cut any layers, right? How often do we hear that behind the chair? Well, this is a great way to do that because what you're doing is you're opening up the hair around the face, but you're not taking away what long-haired clients value most, which is their length, right? So again, gentle hold with my lead hand, and I'm just coming through and working that shear all the way down. Tip of the shear pointed at the ground. Now, just like we did on our previous side, now we connect the two sides and we get rid of the corner length. So again, like I said, a great way to make sure that we don't lose the length that sits directly in front of the ear. So boom. Now, on a client, obviously she would have a shoulder or something, so I'm gonna turn her head. Let's see. So I'm gonna turn her head like this, and I'm gonna comb it and cut it on the front side of her, okay? So don't forget that. So again, we're gonna turn the client's head and we're gonna cut that corner piece on her front side. All right, so now we've started to create some really good movement. You guys can already see that. Just flipping it around like that. We've got this really beautiful face frame. Still have all this density. So now what we need to do for our long layers is we need to create just a little bit of airiness, right? We want a little bit of airiness on the inside of our model's hair, okay? So we're gonna cut some layers. I'll lower her a little bit for this so you guys can actually see what we do. You know, I think one of the things about hair cutting, you know, behind the chair and elsewhere is that people just get really nervous, you know? There's a lot of nerves happening because all these clients walk in with these little lighted rectangles, right? These little lighted rectangles then come in and they're saying, this is what we want, you know? And you just look at it and it can be overwhelming because you don't necessarily know how to cut it. Remember, we're not teaching you haircuts, I'm teaching you techniques. And these techniques are transferable to all types of haircuts. And I can show you that, you know, when we're all done about how this technique, I've actually cut a bob on this that went viral on social media. She's got like a really beautiful blonde money piece, bob to here. Same technique without a face frame, but haircut the same way, and it's a bob to here. Because it's all about technique. It's not about a haircut, it's about the techniques that you use to achieve the haircut. Okay, So now we're going to start by cutting our layers. We're going to start right in the back temple, okay? We're going to take basically a 1-inch section, and if I were to look at her head from an aerial view when we cut this, it's going to look like a pizza, right? So we're taking that little kind of pie-shaped subsections, working ourselves all the way around the head. So I'm going to come again here, and you notice my fingertips again. Oh, that's a little too high still for you. Hold on. You got long hair. You know how it goes. You know how it goes. All right, let's see if that works. All right, so we're going to come in here. Yeah, that works. Okay, so we're going to come in and notice that my fingertips, just like when we cut her face frame, the tips of my fingers are pointing straight down to the ground. So what you get is this really beautiful point here. And we're just going to come in and remove that point with a point cut. Again, I'm keeping my shears parallel as possible to the hair because I want it to be very soft. The more diagonal your shear goes into the hair, the stronger the texture. And our goal with this long layer is to make it really soft. Next section, come in here. Same thing, fingers pointing straight down to the ground. And we just work off that corner. Now, one of the things too that I think is really, important cutting hair just in general is that you create continuity in the haircut and symmetry, right? I mean, symmetry is what your eye sees as beauty. So you'll notice I do go through, even when I texturize, I go through section by section, okay? Something that's really important. I think, especially with texturizing, people tend to just start, okay, I'm gonna grab a piece here, I'm gonna grab a piece here, I'm gonna remove this, I'm gonna remove that. But if you don't do it somewhat systematically, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to have that client that comes in and says to you, like, I feel like I grow more hair on the right side than the left. I don't know what's going on, but she's a little denser over here, lighter over here. And probably what happened is last time you cut her hair, over here you were talking about, the beautiful strawberries at Whole Foods and how lovely the day was. And then over here you start talking about your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whoever, and how they were just, mind hacked you in the morning and blah, blah, blah. And you start getting a little more aggressive. And so the texture starts to become less continuity. If you follow subsections when you're texturizing, you're going to make sure that you get a much more kind of beautiful silhouette and symmetry to your haircut. Next section, another pie-shaped subsection. Combing that straight up, removing the point, keeping my shear as parallel as possible to the hair in order to create maximum softness. Now you'll notice, so I'm on my client's right side right now. On my client's right side, in order to get my hands in the proper position, what do? I lead my subsection, right? So right now, I'm leading my subsection, okay? On the left side, I trail my subsection, okay? Which means I'm on the back side of it. I'm on this side when I'm going around this way, and I'm in front of it when I'm coming on the right side. The reason that we do that is because then your hands are easily put into position to create the layers that we're trying to create. So then this becomes easy right here. To come up here, go like this, get my fingers in the right position, and just remove that hair. Okay, so we've worked ourselves all the way through. Now we're just going to take a 1-inch section down the middle here, comb it straight up, and do the same thing. And just remove that point that sits right in front. Again, keeping our shear as parallel to the hair as possible. All right, so our next section, do you guys remember when we took our very first section of this haircut, we took it from the parietal ridge to the nape, okay? So we're gonna revisit that section. So I'm gonna come in here, section off, parietal ridge to the nape. Because remember, what we did was we created maximum strength in our hairline, right? Maximum strength, because we created as blunt of a haircut as possible, okay? So now I want you guys to see this. We're gonna take this, take a middle section, using the wide tooth portion of our comb. I'm gonna comb this hair straight up in the air, right? So when you comb it straight up in the air, what you'll notice is there's a lot of hair that doesn't make it, okay? There's a lot of hair that doesn't reach. So as we comb this straight up, we're gonna come in and just create a little bit of texture. Now, we've talked about this quite a bit. we've been very parallel into the hair because we're trying to create softness. Here we want to create a little bit more piecey texture, so I come in with my shear at a little bit more of a diagonal, right? So that diagonal then is going to create just a little bit more texture out of that perimeter, right? So just a little bit more of a diagonal. And I just work that in 3 subsections. So that occipital bone to nape gets worked in 3 subsections. Comb this straight up. Diagonal, diagonal, diagonal. Boom. And we just go in there and we just take a couple hits, guys. So we're not like overworking that section, you know, and kind of like removing all the hair. We want to make sure that we still have some good strength in the perimeter, right, of her haircut. All right, so now as we're moving her hair, we're starting to see things lighten up, but she's still got all of her length. She's looking great. She's looking in the mirror, loving what she's seeing. So now, we've layered the top, we've layered the perimeter. We have not touched the densest part of the hair, and I like to leave that for last because then you can really tell like how much texture do I need to add, right? If you go into the densest part and then you start layering the top, you end up with problems. Or if you go into the top and you layer it straight, I see this so often, like pulled straight up and then just cut off. That's when you start to get that like 3-layer, 2-layer haircut, right? And we're trying to avoid that. We want everything to melt seamlessly, almost like we cracked an egg on top of her head and then the layers just came out, right? So now we've got the densest part of her hair left, okay? So we're gonna come in and work these sections. There's 2 ways you can go about this. One way is come in here and work with the tip of your shear and just come in and just start removing. And now again, it's not a slide cut, it's an open and close of the shear, okay? And that is one that I learned from my good friend, Hairstyle by Carolyn. She's a great hair cutter, check her out if you haven't. She's out of Utah and she's just an awesome, awesome hairstylist. Or we can come in here, and what I like to do a lot of times is I like to come in here and just start taking pieces like that, ever so soft. Now again, our shear is parallel to the hair, right? Because we're trying to create softness. So I'll come in here and just work these sections. And just start to take away some of that hair internally. You guys see that? How like nice and soft that is? But then, when we turn her around, it's really still just a really beautiful, strong shape, but it has internal texture, okay? And I think that that's something that's really important for long layered clients, is that they like their hair to move. They don't want it to just sit like a blanket, but they just still want to feel like they have hair. And I think that that's one of the most important things when you're talking about long layered hair, is that people take away their hair if you go in and you get too aggressive with strong layers, right? We start to remove all that hair on the inside, or on the outside, and none on the inside, because all you're doing is taking the end shorter, but you're not taking out any of the interior length, and that makes it a little bit more difficult. Here, we keep the length on the outside, but we remove weight from the inside, right? And that's the difference of something that's overly layered on long hair that doesn't necessarily connect with this kind of like mermaid, Victoria's Secret, nice, beautiful long hair fashion, because the layers are taken from the outside in, not the inside out. Next section, coming through, I'll work, and again, just start to remove some of that hair. My shear is very parallel to the hair. Let it go. All right, now we'll do that really slow right here for you guys to see. So I'm gonna take, notice we're still working on these pie-shaped subsections, right? Still working that all the way around the head. So really slow looks like this. Come in, and then you just almost like wave your wrist like you're saying hi, right? So if you can do that for me at home, just wave to, you know, wave to whoever you're with having coffee, you know, wave to a friend, wave out the window to the mailman, the school bus driver, whatever it is. And you can see, real gently, you can still create that look, moving slower. And then as you get a little bit more comfortable, you can start to speed that up a bit, right? So our next section, and I'm going roughly 4 inches in from the perimeter, okay? So that's kind of what stems to be your guide, about 4 inches in from the perimeter. And then you just work through that section, just creating more and more softness, right? Come in, create more softness, soften that section, start giving it some nice internal layers. Now stay away from that front section. I noticed I just picked all that up. We want to stay about a half an inch away from it. Come in, and just create nice, soft internal layers. And then here's where you can touch the hair, judge if you need to cut more. I actually think we're doing pretty well here. I don't know if we need to cut any more. Now I'm going to come in, and if you remember that very front triangle, I'm just going to soften that ever so slightly. So I'm going to come in, and now I'm going to pull it straight up in the air, shear very parallel, right? Because we're creating maximum softness. So my shear, when it enters the hair to point cut, is very parallel. And just soften that corner just ever so slightly. And again, comb it straight up. Shear enters that hair, very vertical, just creating some nice softness in that section. All right, so now we're pretty good. I think we've got, thank you, Yasmin. Brilliant technique, I really appreciate it. Now, so we've come in and we've started to create our long layers. Now we've got to give our long layer a little bit of style. One thing I will tell you is I'm not a fan of texture shear or a thinning shear on long hair. I feel like it depletes the integrity of that hair, and that hair isn't cut enough to have that happen. Meaning, some of this hair on your long haired clients is 3 to 4 years old, right? Like, it's just not cut enough. So if it's taking multiple beatings with a thinning shear, it's not gonna hold up, right? That's what's gonna end up happening. It's gonna start to get frizzy on the ends. It's also gonna start to not be able to carry the same amount of shape. Like if you're cutting a bob or you're cutting something like that where the hair is removed relatively frequently, then I would say, yeah, go for it. If you're one of those thinning shear, texture shear type people, it makes more sense to me. But if you're working on hair that's gonna live on that head for 3, 4, 5 years, it's really important that you manage that integrity. Because if that long hair loses its integrity, even if it's in like the color process or whatever, it's no longer gonna have the same kind of epic beauty that it does if the health and the integrity of that hair, you know, is maintained. So I'm coming in here and I'm just working some curls, working a little curl magic. You'll notice we give it a little spin, a little drop. So basically, just think about drawing a circle with the iron when you're ready to go to your next section. So I draw a circle and then I slide down. So now I did from ear to ear, or excuse me, I did from the front to the ear on her left side. So now I'm gonna bring myself over to the right side. I'm not gonna go ahead and work myself all the way around the head and then end on the right side. I'm gonna come over to the right side for multiple reasons. Number one, she's sitting there looking in the mirror, right? She's looking in the mirror, looking at herself, judging the haircut, judging how she feels. So we want to get this side, you know, the front side's done as soon as possible so she can start to already think about what a wonderful haircut you've given her. So that's number one. Number two things change the way hair sits. Heat and water, right? And so if I'm working myself from left to right around her head, what's going to end up happening? The left side is going to cool by the time we're ready to zhuzh the hair and add a little bit of our Lanza dry texture spray, right? So that side's going to be all nice and cool, and it's going to be voluminous, and it's going to have staying power. The right side, however, is still going to be warm. And so if that's still warm, and then I start ruffling with it and kind of breaking down that curl, if you will, I'm gonna get one side that's really nice and lifeful, and then I'm gonna get the other side that's a little bit saggy and a little bit dead. And so what we want is to make sure that we get nice equanimity in our sides. So we're coming in here and we're doing the left side and then the right side in order to make sure that they both have sufficient time to cool, you know? And that's one of the things that I learned, you know, my parents owned a hair salon. I started working at a hair salon when I was 14 as a receptionist. My parents owned a hair salon for 40 some odd years, but they owned like kind of a shampoo set Friday hair salon. And a lot of young people these days don't really even know what shampoo set Friday is. And it was a time where the ladies came in and got their hair done once a week, and they expected that to last an entire week. And so by watching some of these people work at the time, thinking, you know, I was really way too cool for this, I actually learned quite a few tips that have transferred for me for working on set for photo shoots and shows and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that technique, that old school technique, that transfers into modern hairdressing. So if you're a young stylist out there, I would challenge you to go ahead and kind of look up some videos. I'm sure there's videos on YouTube that talk about roller sets and finger waves and all the things that used to happen that don't happen as frequently right now, because there's some great knowledge in there. You know, knowledge for, especially for you young stylists, or you know, even if you've been in the game for 10, 15 years, but you just didn't take the time to learn how to do these things, you know, that kind of knowledge is totally going to help you out if you're somebody who is interested in doing session work, if you're somebody who wants to do more photo shoots, if you're somebody who's just trying to elevate, you know, the styles that walk out of your chair onto the street in whatever city you reside. Because I think, like I said in the beginning, you know, of this broadcast, is that your number one source of advertisement is what walks out of your chair. So if you're not taking the extra time to really give your client a nice final finish, or, you know, using some sort of hot tool to kind of seal down the hair, you're missing free advertisement, especially in the modern era of social media with selfies and TikToks and all the goodness that people, you know, find themselves doing, especially during this pandemic, because they have so much extra time. You'll notice a lot of people, you know, on social media that maybe weren't on social media prior, or people who were on social media spending a lot more time on social media doing things like that. So it's not a bad idea to just take the little bit of extra time, especially if you're somebody who's new and you're not fully booked, or you're feeling like maybe the virus has hit your books a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't hurt just to spend an extra $5, right? Really working those irons, really working that round brush, whatever the style that your client wants, because that is still free advertisement no matter how you spin it. All right, so we're working through, and you guys can see, we're just taking nice kind of basically, I would say, 1.5 inch sections by 1.5 inch sections. So I'm just working through her head. I'm not having like a rhyme or reason, because our goal is to create kind of like some confusion, you know? Our goal is to create multiple lengths, multiple things happening. So I just grab sections and I just twist them the whatever way, you know, my mind feels like it should go, okay? So I'm coming through, just working these nice sections. And when you do this like salon speed, I'm telling you guys, it's something that can work out in your favor really quickly and really effectively, right? It's got maximum impact with a little, you know, less work, right? So we're coming in here and we're making sure that gets nice. Got my iron set up all the way hot, just so you know. I'm not taking it down. I've got it set up all the way hot, but I move quickly. So you'll notice that the iron doesn't sit on any one section. I'm pulling her with me, sorry. The iron doesn't sit on any one section of the hair too long. The iron's continually working through the hair, which is keeping me, you know, that hair protected. Not to mention, remember what we used for our cutting lotion? I told you I used a little bit of Lanza's healing oil. Great product if you like oils. Has heat protection up to 510 degrees, and we know there really isn't, you know, a whole lot of heat tool products that get that hot. So I know this hair is protected from any kind of heat damage. So then I am feeling free to use my iron, you know, the way it's meant to be used, with its nice high heat. And even if I had just colored her hair, again, with that healing oil, I feel abundantly comfortable using a high amount of heat on the hair, because I know it's protected and it's not going to get damaged from the iron work that I do. So you guys see, again, we're just drawing our circles with the iron, boom, boom. And you notice how fast, I mean, really you can get through this fast. Now, one thing before we're almost done here doing our curls, I want to show you guys. Even like what you have to remember is that when you're doing hair, every action has a reaction. Just actually in life in general, every action has a reaction. So if I come in here and I take a very diagonal or almost horizontal section, it is creating a different curl than if I take a very vertical section. So if I'm here doing this, it's going to be a little bit more of like a fluffy curl, right? If I go through and take that section more vertical, it's going to be a little bit more of like a tightrope curl. So you see that. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do it really vertical. And so you'll notice if I keep this, the iron, you see how vertical it is? There's not much of a diagonal to it. You see the difference in the curl? You get this fluffy curl and then you get like a little bit of a rope curl. This is tighter, this is fluffier. So every action has a reaction. There's no right or wrong way necessarily. It's just you have to understand if I do one thing, this is going to be the result. And that's going to help you so much behind the chair, kind of demystifying or de-stressing haircutting. It's like if I cut a line this way, this is going to happen. So then when you go through and people bring in their little Pinterest haircut or their Instagram haircut, their Instagram bob, whatever they're looking for, you're not gonna feel stress cutting it because you know if I do this, this happens. So if this haircut has short on top, you know, chunky layers through here and wispy on the hairline, I know shear goes into the hair parallel, it's gonna be soft. Shear goes into the hair diagonal, it's gonna be much stronger texture, blah, 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 things like that. So it's gonna really help you out. Now I'm gonna take a little bit of a dry texture spray. You guys see that right there? Lanza's dry texture spray, nice and light. I love this stuff. If you're a dry textured junkie, then this is one I would definitely want to try. I'm gonna take this, and what I'm actually gonna do, you guys, is I'm gonna separate the hair, and I'm just gonna give it a nice blast down at the base. One thing about, you know, long hair like this is it can be heavy, so we want to make sure that we come in here and just give it a little bit of grit at the base, at the root. Okay, gonna give it a little bit more movement. Come in and just blast that. And then I would have my client stand up, flip her hair over. So a little bit tougher for this one to do that. So we're gonna just do it ourselves. But I want you to notice something. Look at the distance that I'm spraying from, okay? So I've got a good 1.5 feet, almost 2 feet of distance that I'm spraying her hair with the dry texture spray, okay? And I think that that's really important also. Like a lot of people tend to get really close. We get really excited when it comes time to do the finishing touches. So we're like right on and we're creating these little wet spots in the hair. And our goal is just still, especially with long hair, is we want softness and we want movement. We want that hair to be brushable, touchable, and playful. So she can just like put it up in a ponytail if she wants to. She can do magnitude of different things throughout the day and it still feels good. All right, so now I'm gonna just give her a little look real quick, guys, just the final zhuzh for me. So I gotta have her facing me just for a sec. Down the middle part. Yeah, now one of the things here, guys, with long hair, she looks so good. This is so great. And I'm telling you right now, like I know your clients are going to appreciate and love this haircut because one of the things, I do about 90% long layers behind the chair throughout the day. And the reason that is because of this haircut right here, because I don't overcut long layers. I keep it still lengthy, but they have something new, they have something fresh, they have something different. Now, I know we're all little hairspray junkies. Again, this is one of my favorite hairsprays to use, and the reason that I love this hairspray so much is because it's a drier, firm hold hairspray, right? So what I mean by that is, I told you earlier, 2 things change the way hair sits, heat and water, right? So a lot of firmer hold hairsprays are wet. This hairspray is still very dry, and so when I put this on her hair, it's not gonna make her hair melt or drop. So, God, she looks great. Now, you can't tell me that you wouldn't have clients rolling up in your salon wanting to look like this, right? This is a home run every time, okay? So I'm telling you, that 6-figure haircut, it's a win. It's gonna help you out behind the chair. I'm gonna set her back here. There we go. All right, guys, that's what we got today for you. That's my 6-figure haircut. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Check me out on Instagram. It's matt.swinney. I always answer questions. If you have any questions about this or anything else, I am more than willing to answer and help you out. As an educator, as a salon owner, and as a human, it's my job to help other human stylists grow and achieve their goals. So I firmly believe that, and if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my job as a person. So I appreciate you, Hairbrain. Love you guys. Thank you so much. I'm sad we're not going to see you at the big event this year, but hopefully we'll catch up, in another way. And I just want to thank you guys very much. Again, hit me up if you need me. Have a great day.